What's up? Welcome back to Nowstalgia. Dave here with a review of The Smashing Machine, the new sports drama biographical film from Benny Safdie, starring Dwayne Johnson as UFC fighter Mark Kerr. The Smashing Machine is the first film from Benny Safdie as a solo director. Of course, him and his brother Josh, the Safdie brothers, previously had a lot of acclaim for their most recent films, namely Good Time and Uncut Gems, but have since separated as a directing duo, with Benny making The Smashing Machine here, and his brother Josh, his first solo directorial effort, Marty Supreme, starring Timothée Chalamet, is actually coming out later this Christmas. So it's our first go-round with the Safdie brothers, split up for now. They seem to still be on good terms, but obviously have their own creative ambitions at the moment. You know, I mean, the Coen brothers, they're split up right now too. After all, these things happen. It's nothing too surprising, right? Benny, in addition to being a solo director here, also has done a lot of supporting acting work of late. We just saw him as the villain of Happy Gilmore 2 earlier this year. And The Smashing Machine is definitely a really successful solo directorial debut for Benny, because it actually won the Silver Lion at Venice earlier this year, and now has a, prime October fall release date from A24. And I think that's because while the movie is successful, the star of the show, the main attraction of The Smashing Machine, is, of course, its star, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. And simply put, A24's The Smashing Machine is a great success because this is, without a shadow of a doubt, the best acting performance of Dwayne Johnson's career. The Rock is unrecognizable as Mark Kerr, in large part due to some very successful and changing prosthetics across the course of the movie, but also because for the first time in seemingly ages, The Rock has really leaned into actually playing a character and not just playing himself. And the depth of that performance really catapults The Smashing Machine beyond just being a standard sports biopic type film. Emily Blunt is also here as Mark Kerr's on and off again girlfriend, Dawn. And while it's certainly a more typical wife type role, Blunt is able to do, I think, a lot with a little with this performance, and is very good as well. It's also a film that has a lot packed into it, because in addition to Mark Kerr's up and down personal life, it's telling the story of the kind of advent of mainstream mixed martial arts and how different that world was like in the late 90s compared to how it is today. If I had one note about the film, is that I wish it would go a bit deeper on some of its themes that it only suggests that in references across its runtime. But overall, I thought it was really successful. I was lucky enough to see it early with one of those IMAX early access screenings. I think it looks really good. And, right away, I think the Rock's performance really grabs you as Kerr. And Mark Kerr, someone who's now a UFC Hall of Famer in the Pioneer wing, alongside, kind of the third lead of the film, the chief supporting performance after Blunt would be Mark Coleman, played by Ryan Bader in this film. Mark Coleman, also a, UFC Pioneer Hall of Famer. And both of them are these, mixed martial artists who are trying to, find success in the career as the UFC is just beginning. We're talking about like the time frame in the late 90s, like 97, 99 is the main stretch of the film, where the UFC, we're talking about like UFC 10, UFC 12, right? The early pay-per-views, right? When UFC, the success of it, let alone the dominance of it has today, but the success of it was hardly a foregone conclusion, right? As culturally, the violence, the brutality of MMA was not yet as accepted as it is now. And of course, this was a time when mixed martial arts competition was not unified the way it is under the UFC. So you had Coleman and Kerr flying back and forth and competing in the Pride Championship over in Japan. And what I like about The Smashing Machine, and I think most people agree that it's better when a biopic of any kind does this, is that it's focused on a fixed period of time, particularly this specific part in Kerr's career as a professional fighter. It's not talking about his rise up the top. It's not a traditional timeline with how it's going. It's just largely linear, but largely a fixed part in the story here. And we kind of dispense with the pleasantries of how he became a MMA fighter, after previously being an aspiring Olympian with wrestling and turning to MMA instead. We move way past that. Like, he's already an adult. He's already someone finding success as someone who's really strong. And I think if you're an MMA fan of any kind, it's also interesting to see how the movie progresses. We're talking about the rules of fighting and what is and isn't allowed. Again, because the sport was just so nascent back then. But I think Johnson is able to imbue a lot of humanity and a lot of detail into the obsession that Kerr had with not being defeated. He's undefeated at the time we start watching the movie and in his career at that point. And also, of course, right away the movie does not shy away from his substance abuse, his reliance on opioids, on painkillers. And if I have a note about the film, is that it doesn't quite go into the substance abuse as much as I thought it would. I thought the movie was going to get a lot darker and a lot harder to watch than it ended up being. It often gets us right to the edge and then turns us back around. And I think that makes the movie more broadly appealing to more viewers, but it doesn't quite have as much of that depth as I was kind of expecting, right? It also seemingly is suggesting that it's going to be a film about maybe not domestic violence, but at least like domestic abusive domestic relationships and toxic relationships anyway, right? Because him and Dawn are just a bull in a china shop when they're together, and her lack of support for his sobriety once he gets to that point becomes a big source of tension between them. And it's just another thing where you think the movie's going to go down that road and it doesn't end up going there. So that's the kind of one thing that I was like a bit, I don't want to say let down. Like I still really enjoyed the movie, but I was just expecting more of that, right? And I think Johnson, as Kerr changes, right, when he's really in pain, when he has to portray someone who's high out of his mind, when he's really going through it, and then when he turns back around and he gets off the wagon and is successfully in a sober program after going to rehab. It's a different kind of performance. The prosthetics change. The Rock's body becomes a bit more recognizable to how we think of it now. I think it's a really good and changing performance. And there was room for more. Now, again, like The Rock, we haven't really seen him do something like this ever, really, right? But we think about recent works. The bar had been so low for The Rock, right? You think of films like Red Notice and Red One and Jungle Cruise, the Jumanji films, movies of varying effectiveness and popularity, but the key similarity between them is that The Rock is doing the same performance the entire time. So, and he's a charismatic guy the entire time. He's a star for a reason, but he always seemingly had a little bit more on the table, right? And that was maybe perhaps referenced with, say, Michael Bay's Pain and Gain, which is now over 10 years old, right? But we hadn't really gotten it ever since he achieved top tier stardom, right? And we had the debacle of Black Adam and all that, and I think his public persona got rinsed a little bit there. But this is such a huge return. You can't even call it a return to form. It's just like a revelation, really, And I think Benny, to his credit, gets a lot out of The Rock. I'm sure this was a really collaborative effort here, and as I said, I think Emily Blunt, as someone who has to emote a lot and has to, for large stretches of the movie, kind of be the villain of the movie. It's a difficult part. It's kind of a nothing part, but I think she's holds the screen as well as she possibly can in the role. Obviously we know how compelling Emily Blunt can be. She's arguably at the peak of her powers, between this and Oppenheimer right now. I just kind of wish she had better material at the moment, because this and Oppenheimer, both celebrated films to varying degrees. We'll see how The Smashing Machine does. I'm not predicting Best Picture like Oppenheimer did, but I think Blunt deserves a little bit more than these type of, wife roles at the moment. So hopefully she gets there. Mark Coleman, I think a really solid performance from Ryan Bader, who is a MMA fighter in and of himself, but he was pretty convincing. Also, I got to shout out Alexander Usyk, the current, boxing heavyweight champion. He plays a fighter in this film with, just a few lines, but he's pretty good in it. It's definitely a transportive movie. Definitely comes across as the 90s visually, and I think the realization of the world of early MMA is done really well. And even some of the stuff in Japan, I don't think much of any was really filmed in Japan, but we get that transportive feeling, right? There's that shot in the skyscraper in the hotel room, very reminiscent of Lost in Translation. in terms of like the Tokyo skyline, things like that. Looks really good. It's funny, box office wise, this A24 must be pretty annoyed because they had the beginning of October weekend booked for months and months, and it was looking like this film actually could overperform, relative to A24's normal standards. And then, of course, the Taylor Swift, not really a movie thing about her new album got announced at AMC theaters. So that's going to almost assuredly take a lot of attention off the Smashing Machine and take the number one spot for the box office, which is a bit of a bummer. But yeah, I think Smashing Machine, like, I'm going to predict it probably doesn't get into Best Picture, but I think Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson's certainly a contender for Best Actor. We'll see how the rest of the field shakes up. But even if it's not, I think this is a really, really good movie, worthwhile film, and talking about a period that hasn't really been adapted on screen in any significant way. And yeah, I like the Smash Machine quite a bit. Shout out Benny Safdie, really accomplishing a lot, I think, with these chops. And he's not really a first-time director, just a first-time solo director. If anything, this film has kind of been compared to one of the early Safdie brothers films from over a decade ago, Lenny Cook. That was also, of course, a sports drama film. So I'll be very curious to compare this to Marty Supreme once that comes out on Christmas from Josh Safdie. So that'll be a fun thing to do, and we'll see what's next for the two of them after this year. But let me know, what did you think of the Smashing Machine? What did you think of The Rock's performance? Let me know. And for more movie reviews, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.